So the next piece that we want to enable is this. So on our student page, we want this extra section down below where it will show what courses the student is currently enrolled in. Okay.
Do we want it on the ad too, or just the edit?
No, we'll just put it on the edit because they need to get added first, generate a student ID, right? Because every enrollment, if I look at my model, every enrollment needs a student ID. So if we put it on the ad, I mean, we can do it, but it'd probably be easier. Let's add the student first, and then you can go in and edit edit them and put them in courses. So I'll just stop that. So I've given you a bit more code. Here. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to add a grid view called GRD courses onto your students page. And here is part of the code. We already have a get student method. So when I load this page, it calls get student and the form populates. We already have that part working. But now at the bottom of our get student method, there's this new code that should get added, and again, I've given you some of it, but I haven't given you all of it. So I want you to take the code that's here, put a grid view on. You'll have to, here's what the grid view should look like, so you can see the columns in the grid view. So you have to put an ASP grid view, call it GRD courses, put it on your student.aspx page, and then take that code I've given you on Blackboard and try to flesh it out to get the grid to populate. Don't worry about the add section. We'll build that part out together. Just the display of the grid view. Your grid should look like this. Well, with the students we've already done, we're now displaying the related courses. So that's what it, ignore the part at the bottom that's used for adding. This grid here is what should show underneath the save button. Okay, Richard, rather than just wait for me to do it, I want you to try to build as much of that as you can. Okay, before everyone's fed and watered. So before we resume this, I want to go over assignment 2. Assignment 2 is now on Blackboard. It's 30% of your marks, so this is the biggest piece of your grade. Okay. The assignment's broken up into 2 parts. There's going to be a small part that's due next week for 4 marks. Then the rest of the assignment is going to be due 2 weeks after that. So you have 3 weeks, which is a fair bit of time. I'm expecting to get some really good applications. Okay. For next week, what you have to submit is a sitemap, document, and an ERD of your database. Okay, and that can be in PDF or JPEG, so you have to upload those to Blackboard. And then 2 weeks after that, all I need is the link to your repository on GitHub and a link to your site running on Azure. I will give you the option to do this assignment on your own or to do it with one other person. Unless I've already spoken to you, if I've already spoken to you and told you you have to do the assignment yourself, it's because there's been some questions about whether you've done the work totally independently up until now. So those of you who fit into that category, you know who you are.
Does it have to be in the same group? Like I can't go with someone, say, another class?
I have to think about that one, Mike. It's a bit of a challenge because the other classes, they're a week behind us because they didn't have class last week. My initial inclination would be to say,
Let's just take class off.
sorry?
Let's just take class
Well,
off.
you're missing the class at the beginning of August and they have class.
It's fine, send
I'll mull that one over. If I agree to it, you're gonna have to meet, they'll have to meet the deadlines for this class. So that means somebody in the other class is gonna have 2 less days to do the work. I'll think about that. Okay. Everybody has to give me a unique project, each group, okay? And you have to, if you do it with a partner, I need both of your names, okay? What are you building? Build whatever you want, okay? I'm not too worried about cheating on this assignment because I better get a whole bunch of different web applications that look and work very differently, okay? So my suggestion is build something that meets one or more of these criteria. 1, something that somebody actually wants to pay you for. Great. 2, build something that you might actually use yourself for your own personal use. Or 3, build something that would be a good thing to have in your portfolio when you're out hunting for another co-op job or a grad job. Okay? I've given you some suggestions. These are things that students have built in the past. I had somebody build last year. Somebody built a gas mileage tracker. You can build anything you like. Okay? I expect everyone's application will be different.
And you're going to need the code for this application?
I will need to see the code, absolutely.
What if you collaborate on GitHub with the same code?
Well, I assume if you have a partner, you'll need to collaborate.
But you don't have to submit to separate things. Like it'll be the same GitHub.
Yeah. All I ask to make it easier for me to mark is both people should just make the submission because Blackboard auto-generates the marking schema for me. But you could just submit the same links. I don't need 2 separate GitHub repos if you're working with a partner. You can give me the same links, that's fine. Okay. So you've got to build a new application from scratch. Don't take the in-class application and change it and give it back to me. If you give me the in-class application, trust me, I can tell. Okay? So make your own, make a new one. You'll need basically to perform CRUD operations against your SQL database. So you can either make a separate database or you can just use the one we've been using in class, create your own tables and add it in there. I think you have access to create at least 2 databases in there. So you need to use Entity Framework. Wherever there's user inputs, you need to perform proper validation. So checking for formatting, data types, length of strings, valid ranges for numbers or dates. I can't tell you what the validation rules should be. The validation rules will be depending on what it is you're building. Okay? You should have some comments in your C# code. And also the 2 things we're going to cover the next 2 weeks are security and error handling. Okay? You'll need to include both of those. Basically, your application, all the pages should be private, so there needs to be a register and a login page. Okay, so we'll use the ASP.NET identity package. We'll show you how to use that next week. Okay, and you'll need to use that as well as some tools. There's also a NuGet package for exception handling. Okay. Okay, so you'll need to do things like handle 404 errors, check query strings, any other system or server errors, that those are handled gracefully. So there's a number of techniques that we'll implement in .NET for that. So for next week, basically what you have to decide in the next week is, are you working with somebody else, and if so, who, and what do you want to build? And what I want first by Sunday night is I want a plan. Okay, these are the pages, this is the site architecture as to how they'll fit together, and here's what our database is going to look like. Here are the tables, here are the fields, here are the keys and the relationships. Okay, so I'm forcing you to plan it out and think the application through before you start coding it. So that's what you have to do in 2 weeks, are parts 1 and 2, and then the rest of it you have an additional 2 weeks. Okay, so you don't have to hand this in, you have 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, particularly because you can work, you have the option to work with somebody else, my standards are going to be high. I want to see something close to a production level application in 3 weeks. Okay, I think you should be able, you're all capable of doing that. Okay, some of the applications I got last year were really, really good, and I would expect no less from you. So minimum of 4 pages with validation. You do need a master page with a nav bar and basic CSS. If you want to use something like Bootstrap or Foundation, by all means go ahead and do that. If you want to write your own CSS, that's fine too. Up to you. Okay? There has to be create, read, update, and delete functionality. Okay, so you'll have to figure how to roll all of those into whatever you're building, whatever makes sense. So there needs to be a registration page so I can sign up and then I can log in, and all those other pages. You can have a public home page with some generic text, a splash screen, welcome, etc., overview of what the application does, and then everything else, all the CRUD functionality has to be behind that login screen. And Entity Framework, you can't drag on the data source control and use that for doing your database operations. You've got to use EF for all of them. Okay, so here's how I'll mark it out of 26. So the first 4 marks are due next week. Then the create, read, update, and delete in whatever form you see fit. A couple marks for validation, security and authentication, exception handling. Up to 2 bonus marks for anything else that you can come up with in the application. Okay? And I'm assigning it now so that it's due, it will be due here on the 27th, which hopefully will give you guys a bit of a break, because I'm going to assume a lot of things you have due will be due into August. So I'm making it due the end of this month, which means this big assignment is done and out of the way. So if you've got other things to be doing the last couple weeks of school, the only thing, you'll have a holiday, you have a long weekend in August, so we'll hand it in. I know this says presentations. I'm going to remove the presentation component from it. The reason for that is simply we're running out of time. If we do presentations, it pretty much eats up a whole class, and we've already lost 2 classes with Victoria Day and the August long weekend. So the assignment will be due Sunday night, and we'll have a regular lesson, because there are a couple of other kind of more advanced topics like Ajax or Web API that I'd like to be able to get into with you guys in that class. So I've removed the presentation component from it. Okay. Questions?
Just for like the workout, let's say a workout tracker. So basically, you get to the website, you log in, or you create an account, you log in, and let's say you choose the exercise you did, the amount of reps, and then you click add to my journal, and then you basically create a journal of workout.
Great.
That's like an application, right?
That's an application. So somewhere in there, I either need to be able to edit or change,
Right, edit or change.
or what you might have would be, let's say you have a list of exercises, right? So I don't have to type it in each time. I want to pick from a drop down. Okay. So you've got, bench press, shoulder press, squats. So that would be in a list, okay. And you could enable update and delete functionality there, right? I want to change the name of an exercise, or I've put one in twice, I've misspelled it, I want to be able to delete it. So you don't have to put update and delete on, you may have you may need several different pages and kind of modules and tables to make it work. You don't have to enable update and delete on all of them, But you'll have to find at least one spot where you can show me you've enabled that functionality and have it working. Okay. So again, pick something that either you think you might be able to take and somebody might pay you for, or build something you might use for your own personal use. Okay? It doesn't really matter to me what you build, but I think you'll enjoy it more if you build something that you're going to use, or you're going to find interesting, or you have an opportunity maybe to develop and sell over time.
So you don't want to make it too complex.
No, here's my suggestion, because I did have students build some things where either they were getting paid or it was something they wanted to build for themselves, but the application was quite big. So my suggestion, if you're thinking about that, if you plan out what it looks like and you think, well, this is really more than I can possibly do in 3 weeks, then think about building the application in phases. So phase 1 is make sure you meet all the requirements so you can get a good grade. Okay? And then think about what are all the extra things that I think this should have that I don't need to have to get a good mark, and I'm not going to be able to finish in 3 weeks. Okay? So get the basics of it working first, make sure you've met the requirements, and then if you have time, you can start into phase 2, and you might have some additional features that you could put in for bonus marks after. Okay? So scope it all out, build the whole, envision the whole thing, what the whole thing looks like, and then you might have to do that. And it's fine if you want to come to me even. I mean, you can spec it all out in here. Here's the sitemap and database, and maybe when I evaluate that, my feedback to you might be, okay, it's great that it looks like this. I would leave this part as a nice to have for now, or a phase 2. Okay, so you can plan out the whole thing, but think about it that way. I don't expect you to spend, 200 hours over the next 3 weeks building it. I know you do have other classes, but the scope doesn't have to be that large. Like Daniel, something you suggested would basically meet the requirements. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. I think, Mike, coming back to your question, I don't see any real reason why you couldn't work with somebody in the other section, really, as long as they know they're going to have to submit it, right? Because if I let you submit it Wednesday, well, then you got 48 more hours than everybody else in the class, which isn't fair. So if you want to work with somebody in the other section, that's fine. Also, that would have been a challenge if we were doing presentations, which we're not. So I don't care if you want to work with one person in the Wednesday section, but everything is, you have to submit it by the Sunday night deadline, or you're going to both get late penalties. Okay. The other thing, I guess, another question, I've already talked to a few of you. A few of you are already building .NET applications outside of class, either for your own use or because you actually have a client or you're doing it at work. Can you use those for the assignment? Yes. So you don't have, if you're already working on something, as long as it meets these requirements, or you may have to make you may have to make a copy of it. If there's certain, like maybe you've built something, but it's all supposed to be public, so there's no authentication. So in that case, make a copy of it, add the authentication, and you can still submit it to me, and I will mark it. That's fine. Okay, so if you are using .NET for something else, as long as it meets the requirements, I'm happy to evaluate it for you and give you my feedback. Your choice. Any other questions? No? Okay, so there is a submission link on Blackboard now for next week for part 1, where you'll get your 4 marks. And then I just have to change the marking rubric for part 2 to remove the presentation from it. And then I'll enable that link for part 2, where you just post your links to Azure and Git. Okay. So let's come back to finish off our courses. Where were we? On my student page. I'll take this out. So I've added an ASP grid view. I've put on a few columns. I asked that your grid look like this one in my sample, so you need these 4 columns. We got a department column, a title column, a grade, and a delete link column. So I just added those 4 columns. The first 3 were bound fields, and the 4th one was an ASP command field with the delete link. I set my auto-generate columns to false, and I've added the enrollment ID as a key field because we'll need that value to make delete work, right? We'll need that as a primary key to uniquely identify. So that was how we started our grid. I'll add the delete functionality in a bit, but I want to get the grid populating. So this takes me to the code that I put on Blackboard for you. So I'm going to grab that code off of Blackboard. So I'm going to take that partly completed section and I'll open up my student.aspx.cs. So we have our getStudent method that checks for a query string and populates our form. So now after this, we also want to populate any enrollments for that student, any classes the student's in. So this should still go inside our using section because we're still going to be using our database object. So after we populate the first name, last name, and enrollment date, I'm going to paste that code in here, right? Because we're still using our DB variable, which we've got inside of our using statement. So now we need to replace all of my square brackets.
Supposed to be students?
Nope, it's not supposed to be students. Yeah, so we want to select the enrollments. No, we're doing it inside of the using state. The using statement already instantiates it. So that DB variable that represents an active connection is available until our using statement closes down here. So we don't need to reconnect. So the enrollments, if we go back to look at our model, Connor and I were having this conversation, we should just be clear about what an enrollment is. An enrollment record is one instance of one student being registered for one particular course. So if the student is registered, the student's taking 3 courses, there'll be 3 separate records in the enrollments table, each one with a unique enrollment ID. So we want to query the enrollments table, but we don't want to get all the enrollments. So we're joining enrollments to courses. So what fields in our model will link those together? Which is the primary key field and which is the foreign key field? So we've got the enrollment foreign key and the course primary key.
Course ID?
Yeah, so we want to match them. So here's our course ID foreign key. We can see one-to-many from the model. And there's our course ID primary key. So we're going to fill course ID on both of those. So we can use a simple join in link syntax, just like we would use a join in a full traditional SQL query. So now we've connected enrollments and courses based on that relationship. One course has many enrollments. We also need to connect up to join the departments because we want to include the name of the department as well. So we've got to link these, and we're going to link them based on department IDs, our primary key field, department IDs, our foreign key field. Here we've got that one-to-many relationship as well. So we're going to join courses and departments based on that department ID column. Now, we don't want all the enrollments for all the students. If we're looking up Kevin's profile, we only want to see the courses Kevin's enrolled in. So what variable will...
Student ID.
Yeah, we'll just use the student ID variable that we declared right at the top of our getStudent method. We used it in the student lookup. We'll also use that variable in the enrollment lookup. So that makes that error go away. So now we just need to replace the 4 fields in the query. So from the enrollments table, we want 2 fields. Which 2 fields do we want to show up? Or do we need to use? One of them will be visible, one of them will be invisible, but we're going to use. Yeah, in no particular order. We need the enrollment ID, because that will be the data key, so we can do a delete, or we can edit. And we'll want to display the grade.
And then courses.
So that'll give us the grade, and we'll be able to use the ID when we do delete. So what columns do we need from the courses model?
Title.
Yep, we'll just include the course title. And from departments, we want the name.
My thing doesn't like your grid courses.
Well, did you name your grid courses? So I'm going to compile that. And now we'll go to students, and we'll try doing a student lookup. So if I go to edit a student now, there's a grid. Everything's populated. We do need to do a little formatting. We probably should apply Bootstrap class to this grid. If I pick another student, this student's in 2 classes, so this is working pretty much as we intended it. So there's a couple of formatting items we need to clean up. One is we should apply a Bootstrap table class to this, so it looks better, it spans the page. We also have this small issue. If I click on students and click add, what should we clean up here? Yeah, the grid doesn't show because there's no because that method doesn't run, but my title is here. I put on an H2 tag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this whole section in an ASP panel, and we can toggle the visibility. That if we're looking up an existing student, we'll make that courses section visible. If we're adding a new student, we'll make it invisible. We won't even show that title. Because later on, we're going to want to put this section in it as well, down at the bottom. So the first thing I'll do is add a class. So I'll add a CSS class. We'll use the same class we've been using. So table striped, table-hover. So that should improve the look of our courses grid. Just give it a quick refresh. So it looks better now, it's spaced out, we've got the alternating background colors, although I don't think it's too bright in here for you to see those, you'll see them on your own. I've got the rollover effect. Whoops, I probably want to change this. This says true. I probably want to change that header text to say delete. Header text should say delete rather than true. That looks better. And I'm going to put this whole section in an ASP panel. I'm going to default the visibility to false. And when we call get student, we'll toggle the visibility of that panel to true so that it shows up. So I've put on an H2, a heading that says courses. So above that, I'm just going to add on an ASP panel tag, give it an ID of PNL courses. We'll give it the run at equal server attribute, and I'll set the visibility property by default to be false. I want to move the closing tag here down below my grid view. So this heading and grid view now are nested inside of my ASP panel. So when we're adding a new student, we want this whole section to be invisible. When we're editing an existing student, we want to turn this panel from invisible to visible. So we'll need one line of code in the C# for that. So now if I go into students and add, doesn't show, that title's hidden. So all we really need to do is in our get student method, we just want to turn the visible property of PNL courses to true. Set visible equal to true. So when we're looking up an existing student, make that section visible on the page. Inside of my get student, we can do it anywhere in here, really, doesn't matter. I'll just put it after we just bind the list of courses. I'll just set PNL courses dot visible equal to true. So by default it's hidden, but when we're looking up a student, we'll turn that on.
You have to set it false somewhere?
I set it to false in the HTML, actually. So that's the default. So it will always be false. I mean, you could do this in page load. You could do it anywhere. There's several different ways of doing this. Just sort of made sense to me to put it here. Once we're getting the student and loading the courses, then we'll make that section of the page visible.
It's a long list of one shot.
Sorry?
It's a long list of one shot until we're out there.
That's right. If it takes a while to populate that list, the panel won't be visible until the list is completed. That's true. So now when I go and add a new student, that title is hidden, but if I look up an existing student, that panel displays. So we have a couple more things we want to do with this. Right now our delete doesn't do anything. We should be able to remove a student from a course. So we should enable the delete functionality. And then we want to add this down below. We want to allow the user to put the student, sign them up for another course. So, and we'll look at how we can implement this cascading drop down. Pick a department and have our courses toggle automatically. So those are the last two things we want to add on to this. And then I'll give you your lab. So in here, we're going to need to generate a delete event handler. So on row deleting, we'll create a new event. And make sure in your grid you've included the data key name field, because we're going to need that value in order to delete. Right? We need to know which student in which course are we removing from the database. So the enrollment ID will uniquely identify one student registration in a particular course. So we need that attribute in blue. If you didn't include that when you created the grid, make sure you put it in. So adding this event handler generated the shell in our C#. So we need to get the ID. So we've already implemented this functionality in our other grids. We need to convert this to an INT32. So get the data key value in the current, called enrollment ID, in the current row. And now we'll have the primary key value so we can do a deletion. Now we'll use our database. So we'll look up the current record. Oops, I should put this in brackets. So we'll query the database with that enrollment ID. We'll now fetch that enrollment record into memory. Now we can remove it. And then we call save changes. And then we'll want to repopulate our page. So we could just call get student again. We have a few options here. We could just call get student, or we could move this code to get the enrollments into its own function and call that. I think I'll just call get student. That'll work. So there's no new code here. We've done delete on several other pages already. We're just implementing it with the enrollments table now. I think that should be everything we need. I'll have to try it out. Don't try it out on yours because I don't think you have extra enrollments yet. I'll try it on mine. We don't have too many records in there, so I don't want you deleting all your enrollments yet. I'll try it and we'll see if it works. Let's see if I add one here. Brandon? We have a problem? What did we do wrong? So I've added one here. If I delete,
It's not that, it's a different.
okay. What issue are you having?
I'm still trying to work on getting the courses loaded into the table, and every time I try to do that, it keeps firing off an error.
What does the error say?
Because I can't keep up because the computer talks about that. But whenever I'm publishing, it says like field or property name credits is not found. I have no clue what it's on,
Are you talking on this page or on another page?
but on this page.
Okay. So in your grid, it sounds like you have a field here that's looking for the data field credits. We're not including credits in the grid.
Never mind.
You're not an idiot, but you may have copied and pasted from another grid.
Yeah.
Well, that's the danger of copying and pasting, right? Is we often don't change all of the things we need to change when we copy our code and try modifying it. You're almost better to type it from scratch, code it from scratch.
Yeah.
Okay. So our delete will work, but it will be easier for us to test out once we've put in the add functionality. So if I do add, our delete should run. So here, if I just refresh, oops. I get my pop-up from our master page, I delete, it goes away. So the last thing we want to do is add this section down at the bottom where we have two drop-down lists and the ability to add. Okay. So let's do that. We're going to put that inside of our ASP panel. So what we'll put in here is, I'm going to make another table. I'll just use an HTML table. Give it a class so it looks kind of like our other table. I'll give it the same class. So table, table, striped, table, hover.
Are we just watching this part?
Nope. So we'll put in a heading. So the first heading will say department. Table head. It's not visible, it's just for good semantic HTML. So we'll pick, so let's see, we want department, title, and add. Those should be our three columns. Department, title, add. So that'll be the first row of our table. Just some headings. And then we put in a T-body.
That's called T.
Whoops, actually I missed a... It stands for table header. So we'll put in a row. with 3 columns. So our first 2 columns will contain drop-down lists, and our third column will contain an add button. I may be missing something, so I just need to refresh for a minute to make sure it looks okay. Yeah. Looks fine. So we want 3 .NET controls. We want a ASP drop-down in the first column, an ASP drop-down in the second column, and an ASP button in the third column. So we'll call this one DDL department. We'll call this one DDL course. Then we'll put on an ASP button. We'll give it an ID of BTN add. The text on it will just say add. We'll give it a little style. And we'll get Visual Studio to write a new event handler.
What was the difference between click and on?
There's click and client click. Client click will run JavaScript on the client. Click will run C# on the server, which is what we want because we need to connect to the database, read the department name, read the course name, the student ID, and save it, and then repopulate. So I'll just compile to get my add click event handler. Okay, so now we've got our button, and we have 2 empty drop-downs. So we're going to need to do a couple things to get those drop-downs to work. How are we going to get those drop-downs to populate? I mean, we did it already, right? On our courses table, courses page, when we add a course, how did we get this drop down to load? We did this last week.
Did you put the table in a panel?
It's inside of the panel that we already put on there, yes. So we have to do a few things in the HTML, and then we have to do write some code in the C# to fill that drop down. So if we look at our course page from last week, we had a method that got our list of departments, and we connected it to a drop-down list with the same name, DDL department. So this exact code we can reuse. Except not only do we want to fill a department drop-down, well, let's start with this. Notice the way this page works. When I load it, notice what's in my course drop-down. By default, there's nothing. So we don't want to populate this drop-down on page load. We just want to populate this one. And then we want this functionality. So what will we need to do? Once we populate the drop-down, what are we going to need to do to get this to work? How does this change? It's a very common function. You got it, right. So the drop-down has a selected index changed event. So we want, on selected index change, we want to run a new query that filters the list of courses based on what department was selected here. So we'll implement all of this. So you need to do a couple things in the HTML first. So in our drop-down list, we need to set the data value field. What field will hold the values for the departments? Right. So we'll need to use department ID as the value field. What about the text field? What field do we want to show the user? Yeah, we want to use the field called name. What about for course? What should the data value field and data text fields be?
Course ID?
Course ID will be the value field, yep. And we'll use title as the data text field. So store the course ID, but show the user the course titles. So that's all we need in the HTML. Now we need to populate this list. Once we've enabled that visible panel because we're looking up a student, we'll want to populate this list. We'll populate this one, as Brandon said, on the selected index changed event of the department. So we'll go into our C#. I mean, we won't see any visible changes with that yet. We'll still get 2 empty drop-downs. So now if we scroll up on our student page, once we make the panel visible, maybe what we'll do before is populate the departments, right? Let's fill everything in that panel. So fill departments to drop down. We're still inside our using command, which is good because we need the database once again. So we'll create a departments variable. We're inside of the getStudent method. So if we're looking up a student, the last thing we did was turn our panel to visible. Before we make the panel visible, we'll fill the department drop-down. So we'll set the data source property to the result of our department query, and we'll call data bind. This code's pretty much the same thing we have here. I guess we could add this. We could add the order by clause, so our drop-down's sorted alphabetically. That would probably be a good idea. So we'll say order by d.name. So we'll compile that change. So now we have our drop-down sorted A to Z. Doesn't look great though, right? This one's blank, so we probably should put in default options into each drop-down. And we don't necessarily want to default this to economics each time. So how can we add Anybody have an idea how we could add default options to both of these? If we look at this one, this version, right? So when the page loads, we want them to look like this. So how can we get this extra option in here as the first one? Richard?
I think we can just add a text that says select.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll add another item in code and insert it at the front of the list after we bind. If we put it in and then bind, it will wipe out that option. So we'll add default options to the two drop-downs. So I'm going to create a new list item object, call it new item. And when I create it, it's an overloaded constructor. So one of the constructors says create a new list item, and as we're creating it, supply the text and the value. Both are considered strings. So I'll supply the text to say select, and I'll maybe give each one a value of 0. The value doesn't matter. Well, actually, the value will matter because we can add validators, and we can check that the value is greater than 0 when the user tries to add, that the options don't say select. So we'll create that, and then we will add it. We'll say ddl department.items.insert. So it says, okay, which index, where do you want to put the new item? We'll put it at position 0, top of the list. And what item do we want to insert? Our new item object. So that we've created an item with the text select and the value of 0, and we're inserting it into the first position of the department dropdown. We'll then insert it into the course dropdown too. So we'll take that same default option and put it into both drop-downs. So when the page loads, both of them will display the text select. Does that make sense what we're doing here? So if I compile now and try again, that's good, looks better. So no title yet. We have our departments. So we need to add two things to this drop-down to populate our course title. We'll need to generate a selected index changed event handler. And we're going to have to do one other thing with this drop-down. How do we get that event handler to fire? That's right, we're going to have to set auto post back to true. This is a big gotcha. With you add a selected index change to a drop-down, if you don't add auto post back, the selected index change never fires. So we'll want to do both of those with this drop-down. So we'll go back into our HTML. So on our drop-down list, I'll add auto post back is equal to true. Only on the department drop-down. And on selected index changed equals, we'll create a new event handler for this. So in this event, we need to evaluate the selected value of DDL department, which department ID the user pick, and then we're going to use Entity Framework to run a new query to get only the courses that match that department ID. And then we'll bind that query result to our course list. So as soon as I change the department, it will automatically refresh the courses. Right? This is the result that we're going for. So I pick engineering, I get the engineering courses. When selected index change runs, it posts my form, I get different courses. So cascading drop-downs we use all the time. So something like we pick Canada or USA, and then we have a state or province list, or we have a state or province, and then we pick a city, or maybe we pick a product category, and then we see products from that category. So it's a very common function, something we should know how to do. So here's our selected index changed event handler. We'll need to connect. So we'll store the selected department ID. So we'll just create an integer variable. What property do we need in here that'll give us the selected department ID? No, it's not ID, because that's just the name of the control. Selected index will give you the index starting at 0. We don't want to know what position in the list. You're close.
Selected item or value?
Yeah, we want selected value. But we're going to have to cast that as an integer, because the selected value by default is considered text.
It's a value?
So now we'll run a query. So we want to filter our query. We don't want all the courses. We only want the courses for the selected department ID. We may as well order by course.title. I guess we don't really need the brackets here. It'll work that way.
Why do we keep doing that?
So get all the courses for the selected department and sort them ascending by title. And now we'll bind to the course dropdown. So we'll convert our course object to a list.
The key on these keyboards are all broke.
And we'll call data bind. Good question, good point. When we call data bind, I'll run it this way and we'll see what happens to that option that says select. So now we should be able to reload our page, pick any department, and have it display all the related courses in the second drop-down. So we'll refresh. So when I pick a department, we do get our courses.
No.
What did I pick? Math.
Mine.
So we do lose that default option, right? When we call data bind, it wipes out whatever was there. So we probably want to repeat that code that inserts that default option back into our course. So I'm just going to grab, but yeah, so I'll grab that and I'll remove it. I don't need the department one. We're not repopulating the department. So I'm going to copy where we're creating the new list item and putting it into the drop-downs. We'll copy those lines. And after we bind, I'll put them in, but I'm going to take it out of department. So we only need 2 of the lines. So recreate, again, the default list item and add that back to the course drop-down. So now every time you choose a new department, we should get the courses filtered, but the default option should still be there. So if I pick economics, it still says select, which is good. My default option stays here. So we just keep having to, we have to keep putting it back in every time we repopulate the list. Oh, because I have a course. Yeah, I have a blank one. If I delete that and go back, that'll go away. Now notice also when it repopulates, it's jumping us to the top of the page, which is a little bit of a pain. I won't get into when we get into Ajax, we can fix that. So on this version, I think I used Ajax. So notice it actually stays here. So the user gets a better experience. So I've used an ASP.NET Ajax control here so that it's only updating this section of the page. We won't have time to do that today. It's pretty simple to implement though, and hopefully we'll do that another day.
We haven't done anything else yet.
Well, if you don't have to refresh the page,
That was fixed.
No.
Yeah.
So the last thing, we just need to do 2 more things here, and then this is done. The first one is we need to add a couple of validators. We should add a range validator and check that the department ID is not 0 and the course ID is not 0 when we click add, right? If we're going to let somebody put them in a course, we are forcing the user to pick a department, pick a course, okay? And then we'll write the save code that will add the record to the enrollments table and repopulate the grid. So if somebody signs up for a course, it would look like this. I'm going to take an engineering course. I'm going to choose chemistry and click, well actually first of all, if I don't choose a course, I get that. So once I pick a course and click add, it should put me in, save me to the database and add that record to the list. Okay? Won't take us long, 10 minutes is plenty of time for this. So we need 2 range validators. So beside our 2 drop-downs, I'm going to add an ASP range validator. We don't need an ID. Thanks, Mike, for teaching me that. We do need a run at equals server. Our control to validate will be DDL department. The type will be an integer. Right, we're checking a number. Our minimum value is going to be 1 because our default option that says select, we gave it 0 because we know any valid department ID is going to be 1 or higher. So minimum can be 0, max can be something sort of arbitrarily high.
So if you just don't put in a maximum value.
It'll fail. It'll say a range validator requires 1. You have to. The error message property can just say required. We can't use a required field validator because the required field validator isn't smart enough to know that if we leave 0 selected, that's not a valid choice. And we'll set the class to label danger. So we'll want two of these. They'll be identical, except the first one, the control to validate's DDL department. The second one, the control to validate, is DDL course. So I'll put on a second one beside my second drop down, and I'll just change the control to validate property. So the first one's validating our department, and the second one's validating the course. Oops. Okay. Whoops. So now I shouldn't be able to click add unless I pick first a department and then pick a course. Okay, so nothing happens right now when I click add, but our validation check is working. If I go back to select, it tells me it's required, I can't submit. So all we need to do now is write the code inside of our add button click handler to save a new record.
Mine's not working.
Did you get an error?
No. It's, when it's sitting on the select, it doesn't say required. When I change it, it changes, but.
Then something is wrong with some of the properties you've set. So I want you to go into your C# now. We already wrote this got Visual Studio to write the on-click event handler for us. We just need to add the code. Right now we've got an empty method in the C#. So we just need to complete that to add a new enrollment. So put in a using command and connect to your database. So we'll connect using the default connection. So you'll want to add that in first. So here's our add method. So we'll connect as per usual. So if we look at our model for a minute, we really only need two values to add a new enrollment. Which two columns do we need in order to add a new record here? Yeah, so we need the student ID and the course ID. Where are we going to get, we won't have a grade yet, because you don't get a grade the second that you enroll in a course. Right? The enrollment ID is auto-generated. So where are these two values going to come from? Yep. So the course ID is from the drop-down. The student ID we can just get out of the query string, basically. We'll add those two values, we'll create a new instance of an enrollment, and we'll call add and then save changes, and then we'll repopulate the page. So we don't need too many lines. A few lines of code should do it. So I'll create a student ID variable where we pull the student ID out of the URL. And we'll create a course ID variable. And as Hayden said, we just get it from the course drop-down, the selected value property. So now we have the two values that we need. So we'll create a new enrollment object. So we'll create a new enrollment. We'll fill the student ID. Whoops, that should say student ID. We'll fill the course ID. We'll add our new enrollment object and call save changes. So that'll, Entity Framework will push that new record to the database. So I'll say, guess I can put a few comments here. Get the values needed. Populate the new enrollment object. Save and refresh. So we want to see that enrollment in the grid, so we can just call get student one more time. So this should add the new enrollment, and then we want to see it automatically added to our grid. So let's try that out. So I'm going to pick a department, pick a course, add,
Right.
break.
Multiply.
So it did add it. The problem is, the problem has to do with repopulating our drop-down lists.
We have to drop down the list before we repopulate.
Yeah, we probably should clear the drop-down lists. That would be a good idea. So TDL. Oh, we can call clear selection. I'm going to try that. We may have to do something else. We could remove all the items. We'll see if that makes a difference. Yeah, that seems to work. So if we just clear the selections before we populate, that will work.
Is that just because it tries to save the state?
Yeah, I think so. So I want to give you your lab. Your lab is basically just for you to implement the functionality we've worked on over the last couple of weeks. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. Have until tomorrow night.
I got a big assignment.
Pardon?
Got a big assignment due tomorrow night.
It's due tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so take until Wednesday night to do the lab. Okay, it's fine. I'll change the date. So the first thing you have to do, we've implemented sorting and paging on the courses page. I want you to implement those as well on the departments and students grids. Okay, so basically all of these pages, it's great we have it here. So add this records per page and the column sorting up and down, both here and here.
And the paging?
And the page. So sorting and paging to these two pages. Okay. So that's requirement 1. And similarly, on the departments page, when you edit, I want to see a courses grid at the bottom. So when I pick a department, we can see all the courses, the child data, just like we've done here with students. We can see the child data. Okay, so the departments page, when we go to edit, we should be able to see the courses. You don't have to be able to add a new course to a department. You should just be able to see the list of courses and delete one. So a courses grid on the bottom of departments, and on the bottom of courses, again, to make it easy for users to navigate around, on this page, we should have, just like our students page has a list of courses, we should be able to go the other way. We should be able to look at a course and see all the students enrolled. Okay, so we could enroll a student in a course or remove them in two places, right? We could go through the student page. I could pick Peter's profile and put him in a course or take him out of a course, or I could pick a course and see all the students that are enrolled and either add a new student or remove a student from the course.
How do you want to add things?
Okay, so for adding, I'll give you a hint. In fact, I give you a hint in here. So you'll need a student drop-down. As the data value field, you'll use the student ID. For the text field, in your query, you should concatenate on the first and last names together. So in your link query, where you're going to run a query to populate the drop-down, you'll want to select a concatenated field. I think you can figure out, do your best. If you can't figure it out, just do the last name, but I'm going to challenge you to do it. Okay? So probably the best way, the best format would be last name, comma, first name, ordered by last name and then first name. That would be the easiest for somebody to pick. If you can't get it working, just use the last name, but see if you can get the drop-down to show both. You should be able to do it. You just have to do a little research. Okay, so both so our student page now has this child view grid, and the department page and the course page will also have them. Okay, so take until Wednesday night. I'll change the due date right now on Blackboard for you, and I will put my files up. So just work with your in-class solution. Just keep going on it. You don't have to build a new solution. Just keep on going with what you have. Okay, and then your assignment Sunday night, please. Your plan. You don't have to do any code for next week for the assignment. You just have to do the lab and plan what you want to build. And if you have any questions about the assignment, if you're not sure, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? Is this a good idea? Just by all means, come and see me or shoot me an email and we can talk about it. Okay, that's it for today. I'll put everything up online. I'll see you guys next week. So due date is the 8th, Wednesday. Wait, yeah, it's Wednesday. Your assignment's due tomorrow? Okay, so Wednesday night. So you got time to do the lab Wednesday.
If I was to just add in what we did today to what I'm working on, is that good enough for the lab, or do you want me to build this?
I'd like you to build it in here so that you also have this working copy, because then next week we can keep doing more with it and it's fully fleshed out, and then you have something in it, and then you don't just have one, because you've got the app you're building, but you got this one too, so you got two.
Okay.
And then also you have something good you can refer to for other applications, right?
So it's going to be posted on GitHub?
I will post it on GitHub right now.
Because I was figuring out that problem I was having, so I missed that on the
Yep.
deleted.
I will post to Git right now. Thank you for reminding me, Brandon.
Oscar, so
You're 2 minutes behind. Then you're 2 minutes behind, then you miss a whole section.
yeah, and then it's just like, well,
So how did you get your
And this is
list
like,
items to
first you
stay
go to
when you
the
refresh the thing?
Pardon me? We don't want it to stay. It should repopulate.
No, the select 0. Because mine disappears on the refresh, and I missed what you did to make it stay. change now, it disappears and makes a difference.
I didn't make one of those every single time you work.
I suggest, Peter, you publish this, not only back it up on your student drive, but publish it to GitHub.
Yeah.
Okay, so that next week, if you have any issue, you can
See,
find
they're both there now.
Yeah.
Change.
Okay.
I missed the part where you.
So on the selected index changed event,
Oh, I didn't know the
you need to add the code. Again, that adds that default option to the course dropdown.
In the
So it's a
Selected index changed event.
both of them, or just the? Because when I
There's only one selected index changed event.
no, I mean like the department course.
No, just the course.
Because the department item, when I switch it back to the department item, it doesn't show the required message anymore. The required message disappears.
Well, I'm gonna put all my code on GitHub now, and then you can also have a look at it there. You can also use that as a helpful reference. Just give me a minute